Welcome back to Somali Nexus. Today, we are reclaiming a narrative that has been distorted for far too long. The history of the Horn of Africa is a profound paradox. It is recognized as the cradle of humanity, yet its people are often dismissed as simple nomads or latecomers to the region. But dig deeper, and you find a civilization ancient Egypt held sacred, Ta-Netjeru, the land of the gods. In this episode, Forgotten Somali Genius, we prove that this history is defined by sophisticated engineering and intellectual mastery. We will explore how ancient sailors dominated the Indian Ocean using the Beden, a unique ship sewn together to survive treacherous reefs. We will discuss the Beden system, a brilliant social innovation that monetized trust to secure global trade networks. We will also shatter the nomad-only myth by visiting fortified stone metropolises like Amud, where engineers tame the Juba and Shabelle rivers to feed thousands. Finally, we uncover invisible technology, the Gabai, a mathematically rigid poetic database used to store history, and Hair, a legal constitution of restorative justice that remains a pillar of resilience today. This is not just history, it is a blueprint of resilience. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss this. Let's get started. Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
So today we're tackling a subject that, well, it's a profound historical paradox, really.
It absolutely is.
It's one that forces a complete reevaluation of how we look at African history. We're talking about Somalia.
Right? A place that everyone knows is the cradle of this ancient, really sophisticated civilization.
But its foundational contributions, in trade, law, engineering, they're almost totally forgotten in the global story.
And it's more than just an oversight, it's a huge gap in our collective knowledge.
So our mission today is really an act of reclamation.
Exactly. We're pulling back the veil on ancient Somali ingenuity, and maybe more importantly, showing you how these systems are incredibly still active today.
To really get this, we have to start with why. Why was this history lost? For anyone listening who values understanding, the gaps in the data, what made this region's history so hard to access?
Well, there are three sorts of main forces at play. You've got political instability, language barriers, and a definite academic bias.
Let's start with instability.
So after the government collapsed in 1991, that created this immediate and just critical gap in archaeology. It effectively froze the clock on any new research for decades.
Wow. So we've basically lost out on 30 years of potential material discoveries.
Precisely. And then on top of that, you have the linguistic barrier records. The great medieval sultanates, they meticulously recorded everything: history, trade, legal cases, all in Arabic. We have these massive libraries of documents, but almost none of them have been translated.
So they're just sitting there, inaccessible to most scholars.
Inaccessible, yeah. And then the third piece is maybe the subtlest.
The academic bias.
That's it. Historically, academia has always prioritized written evidence from so-called literate societies.
Which means they undervalued places like Somalia, the nation of poets.
They systematically undervalue them. These incredibly rigorous, high-fidelity oral systems for transferring knowledge, for preserving history and law, verbatim. They were often just dismissed as folklore.
So the very way they stored their knowledge worked against them in the Western historical record.
You got it.
Okay, so this whole deep dive is about challenging that old colonial narrative, the one that painted Somalis as latecomers to the Horn of Africa. Let's start at the very, very beginning, the land of Punt.
And we're not talking centuries here, we're talking millennia.
Right?
There's a really powerful scholarly consensus now that identifies the Somali Peninsula as the heartland of the favored land of Punt.
A key trading partner for pharaonic Egypt.
A core partner, yeah. Going back to at least the 2nd millennium BC.
And it's fascinating just how highly the Egyptians regarded Punt. It wasn't just a place they got incense from.
Not at all. The Egyptians called it Ta-Netjeru,
Which means
the land of the gods. And this reverence was profound. It came from their own foundation myth that their people actually originated in Punt and then migrated down the Nile.
So that puts the Somali Peninsula right at the center of the ancient world's origin stories.
Absolutely. At the spiritual center.
Okay, so if the Egyptian texts give us that deep antiquity, what about the physical evidence? What's on the ground?
You have to look at the rock art of Las Gael. Some of it dates as far back as 9000 BC.
Incredible.
And these are not just simple little etchings. They're sophisticated cultural documents. You see ancient humans in ceremonial dress worshipping these humpless cows with these huge lyre-shaved horns.
So it shows a really deep indigenous history of complex culture going way back into the Neolithic.
Exactly. And it wasn't just painters and caves. The built environment tells a story too.
The megalithic structures.
Yes, the landscape is just dotted with them. You see these massive structures called talo. They're complex burial cairns. They would have required significant social coordination to build.
And huge walls too, right?
Massive stone walls, like the Wagade Wall. It's a defensive structure measuring something like over 750 by 690 feet.
Now, I want you to clarify something. The difference between a general Talo cairn and the Ta-Netjeru mountains, because that distinction is critical.
That's a great point. So talo are the general ancient burial mounds you find widely, but the Ta-Netjeru, especially in the northeast, are unique.
Why?
Because they have tangible signs of an ancient, undeciphered writing system engraved right on the stones.
Which completely challenges the oral-only idea.
That shatters it. It shows they were experimenting with literacy from their earliest days.
Okay, let's move from the land to the sea. We need to talk about how Somali merchants basically engineered the entire Indian Ocean trade network. You describe this as a complete technological stack.
That's the perfect way to see it. It's a complete system. You have the hardware, the operating system, and a really robust security protocol, all of it working together.
Let's start with the hardware, the Beden ship. It's famous for being a sewn ship. Why? So, the planks. It sounds kind of flimsy for the open ocean.
It sounds counterintuitive, but it was a brilliant technological choice, not a limitation. Sewing the planks gave the hull this incredible flexibility. It was like a suspension system for the boat. That flexibility made it super resilient against coastal reefs, which are all over the Somali coast, and it meant they could safely beach the ship on sandy shores, where there were no deep water ports.
So the tech was perfectly optimized for their own environment, which gave them an edge.
A huge edge.
But what about out on the open ocean, far from land? How did they navigate?
That was the operating system. Pastoral astronomy. Somali sailors had this encyclopedic knowledge of the monsoons. They used them like a predictable highway for trade.
But that's close to the coast. What about deep sea?
When they left the coast, they relied on celestial charts on the positions of specific stars. It's a really sophisticated practice, very similar to the star path navigation the Polynesians were using thousands of miles away.
So we have the ship, the navigation. Now for the security protocol. This is what I find so interesting. The ABAN system.
It is ingenious.
Because the biggest problem in this kind of trade is trust. Right. How does a merchant move valuable goods through different clan territories without an army?
The ABAN system was the solution. It was the bedrock of their whole security network. A merchant would hire an Abanian, a local protector.
And this wasn't just any guy.
No. He was chosen specifically for his reputation and the political power of his family, his lineage.
So, what happens if the Aban fails? What are the actual stakes?
The stakes are existential. The Aban staked his personal honor and his entire lineage, his honor, on the safe passage of those goods, if anything happened to that merchant or his cargo.
It's a direct assault on the Aban's reputation.
A profound assault, yes, and it demanded a response from his entire clan.
So, you're essentially monetizing social capital. You're turning reputation into quantifiable economic security.
That's it exactly. Any attack becomes a corporate liability for the entire lineage. It completely solves the trust problem. A work of social genius.
It really is. Okay, so this brings us to the next big stereotype. We need to shatter the idea that this was a purely nomadic culture. Let's talk about how they engineered the land.
Right? The nomadic narrative just ignores the reality on the ground, especially along the Juba and Shabelle rivers. This wasn't small-time farming.
We're talking large-scale coordinated projects.
We are. Ancient Somalis used large-scale irrigated agriculture. Astronaut photography actually reveals these vast, complex networks of ancient irrigation canals coming off the rivers,
Wow.
feeding staple crops like sorghum and maize on a massive scale. This is what provided the economic foundation for cities to grow.
And that wealth led to these coastal metropolises, like Mogadishu, Hamar.
Mogadishu was a global powerhouse, a keynote on the medieval maritime Silk Road. By the 14th, 15th centuries, geographers called it the wealthiest city on the East African coast. It dominated the gold trade.
But the inland cities are maybe even more revealing. The forgotten ones.
Yes, look at places like Amud and Abassa from the 15th century. Archaeology confirms these were dense stone-built urban centers, not temporary camps.
What kind of scale are we talking about?
In some places, we found evidence of over 200 stone buildings, many of them multiple stories high.
That's a serious urban footprint. And they were built for defense?
Oh, absolutely. They were feats of defensive engineering, built on high hills, enclosed by these large, complex stone walls. It tells you this was a diversified civilization with engineers, merchants, and a society capable of massive projects.
Okay, so if the cities were this complex, they needed sophisticated ways to manage society. Legal technology. This brings us to the intangible inventions.
Exactly, this shift is crucial. Somalis created these codified technologies to manage social and legal life that are just breathtakingly structured.
Let's start with hair. It's often just called customary law.
It's so much more than that. Hair is a highly structured, rigorously codified system of democratic governance, an oral constitution. Its core technology is restorative justice through the payment of magam.
Blood compensation. But how does that not just lead to bigger clan wars? If one lineage has to pay another, doesn't that just create more conflict?
That's the brilliant part. Hair makes violence a corporate liability, not an individual act.
The whole lineage pays.
The whole lineage pays. So it actively incentivizes every single member of that group to police their own people, to resolve disputes before they escalate. It breaks the cycle of vengeance.
It's collective risk management. And you said it also functioned like a Bill of Rights.
Yes, the system explicitly protected vulnerable groups. Older adults, women, poets, even guests. They had defined legal protections, even in a system based on clan strength.
So if hair was the legal technology, the gabe was the information technology. How does poetry become a high-fidelity database?
The gabe is just a linguistic masterpiece. It's a high-level mnemonic technology. Because all knowledge was oral, you needed an absolute guarantee that complex data history law to genealogy was passed down verbatim.
And the poetic form itself was the guarantee.
Precisely. The gabe has this rigid mathematical structure, a strict meter, an alliterative pattern, a specific number of vowel lengths per line.
Which makes it easy to memorize, but hard to change.
Impossible to alter without breaking the entire mathematical form. The complexity acts like a spell check. You'd know immediately if a single word was wrong.
So if we were to use an analogy for today, is it like the world's first decentralized ledger, a human blockchain?
That is an excellent analogy. You can't change one black without destroying the whole chain. These poets weren't just artists. They were intellectuals, historians, tools of statecraft.
So when we pull all of this together, the Beden ship, the hair system, what does it all mean for us today? The big takeaway for me is just this profound legacy of resilience.
That's the most significant insight, the active functional continuity of these ancient systems right now in modern times.
They never became obsolete.
They just adapted. And we saw this most clearly and tragically after the state collapsed in 1991.
When all the formal institutions disappeared.
Absolutely. The court systems vanished, but hair remained. In many places, it's still the only trusted and effective system for adjudicating disputes and maintaining social order.
And the Abon system, that security protocol, it adapted to the modern global economy.
Seamlessly. It adapted to global capitalism without missing a beat. The modern Abon today might be a shareholder in a telecom company.
And he uses his reputation.
That same inherited social capital and lineage honor, yes, he uses it to protect the company's cell towers from theft and to recruit customers from his own clan. The ancient invention is the foundation of modern Somali commerce.
This just demands that we fundamentally reclassify this legacy. We can't look at Hoyer or the Abon or the Gabai as primitive custom.
You can't. We have to recognize them for what they demonstrably are: sophisticated legal, commercial, and information technologies.
And when you do that,
It forces a fundamental reassessment of African history's foundational pillars. It moves Somalia from the periphery right back to the center of ancient innovation, where it belongs.